As I've mentioned previously, I've always thought that this story capped off Hartnell's golden era in my opinion. As from an unearthly child up to this story, I don't think there was a single bad one for me. I've personally always been on the side of liking this generally Marmite Dalek outing, thinking it was a great end to the first 10 Hartnell stories. Christmas Day 2018, I decided to come back and visit this story via a marathon, as I was interested in coming back to give it another watch and for a review on the channel. This time around, however, I wasn't as impressed with this story, with my mindset now being rather mixed on the story, lowering the story's rating down to a 6 for me. There are many good moments to it for me, but there are many that are bad or mediocre. The story itself is divided into 6 episodes and begins with what is for me the best episode from the whole story, World's End. The TARDIS lands in what appears to be a ruined and devastated London, of which the Doctor finds ever-growingly suspicious throughout these 23 minutes. Susan ends up hurting her ankle, which leads to that rather famous line from the first Doctor, and then him and Ian go off investigating as access to the TARDIS has been severed by Susan's accident. This episode sets the precedent for the uneven production values the story will have in the following 5 installments for me, as we get some magnificent sets such as the riverside the TARDIS lands on, and was quite possibly the most iconic cliffhanger in this show, which is probably one you haven't seen even if you don't think you have. But then we also get stuff like the £2.50 spaceship and a stunt involving Ian that is a tad unconvincing. The magnificent cliffhanger of this episode leads us into the second chapter, the Daleks, which continues to add layers and depths to this story, such as the introduction of what I'm going to nickname the Survivors. A particular sequence in this installment proves and displays another problem I have with the serial, that being the music. The moment in question is one that lasts about a minute or so long in this episode, where Barbara follows a survivor to the shelter that has no dialogue and is trying to be completely driven by the music. My problem is that the music doesn't really work or fit with the scene. The same score is then reused in the next episode, Day of Reckoning, and fits a little better to the scene it was used with there, but it doesn't stop having another problem that I have, not just with this piece but the whole score to this story. That being, it's bland, not that good and virtually non-existent. There's some scenes within the story where it's being used in the background, but it might as well not be there, as it's so faint. This episode and the next episode, The End of Tomorrow, also show very well another big positive I have with this story, that being the location work. Day of Reckoning is famous for having the Daleks go across Westminster Bridge, even though the cameras only show a side-on shot of the bridge and not an actual shot of them on the bridge from the perspective of a camera shot on the bridge, which is what pretty much every recreation of this scene has done, and The End of Tomorrow continues to have great location work, although not quite as good as what was presented in episode 3. The Waking Alley is the 5th episode and also shows some parts of uneven production values. The shots and sets of the mines are good, but the sliver and the cliffhanger not so much for me. The finale, Flashpoint, is a good end to the story, I would say, aside from Barbara mimicking a Dalek, and has one of the most powerful sequences in all of Doctor Who. Susan's departure, which is easily one of the best scenes in the show. Overall, the Dalek Invasion of Earth is a story which has some good, bad or mediocre moments in my opinion. Episode 1 is a really atmospheric opening and sets the story well, and 6 concludes it well, I would say. But the middle 4 aren't the greatest, having good moments and bad moments. The Robomen are a good idea but kind of weak in execution from an acting point of view. The Sliver is an interesting idea but much better realised in Terry's later Dalek stories, the Daleks' Master Plan and Genesis of the Daleks. The location work is generally excellent and the cliffhanger to World's End is pretty great. but to me the Dalek invasion of Earth comes across as a bit of a mixed bag in my opinion. Whereas I don't think it's great, I can easily watch it again for some of the ideas and concepts it has. However, I will also say that the final 5 minutes are some of the best that the show has ever given us. Season 4 of the show Doctor Who was quite an important one in many ways. The 10th planet and power of the Daleks bridged what was the very first regeneration. Highlanders seemingly ended pure historicals for good until Black Orchid, and evil seemingly ended the Daleks. Not only that, it's unique for having 2 stories each for the 2 most iconic Doctor Who villains, the Cybermen and the Daleks, with the 10th planet, the power of the Daleks, the Moonbase and the evil of the Daleks. 60s Doctor Who saw 6 Dalek stories and 5 Cybermen stories, with the first Doctor's era focusing on Dalek stories as the big monsters for his tenure, and the second having the Cybermen as his big villains. All of his Cybermen stories are liked for the most part, I would say, with regards to the general consensus, and I will easily say and happily place a bet that there are people that will at least give the Moonbase, the Tomb of the Cybermen and the Invasion all 10 out of 10s. Personally, I'm not one of them. Whereas I do find that the Tomb of the Cybermen is an utter classic with around a 9 out of 10 for me, I do find the Invasion slightly overrated at an 8 out of 10. However, the most overrated one for me would be the Moonbase. I have seen quite a few people over the years praise and love this story, but to me it doesn't quite meet the mark of the big status that it has. It has some good moments to it, like the speech from the second Doctor in episode 2, which, similar to the Dalek invasion of Earth's cliffhanger to episode 1, in that it's something you've probably seen even if you don't think you have. But overall, I simply prefer other Cybermen stories. The plot itself, whereas it's creative and unique, is a little silly. In the 10th planet we had the Cybermen invade an Antarctic base. In Invasion we had them taking over London with the help of international electromatics from the sewers, and here we have them trying to destroy planet Earth with the weather. However, I will say that the plot element of the infection is pretty well done and convincing, despite how the Cybermen actually managed to cause it is never fully explained. It is, but with the way it was done, it does leave a question open that is not really answered within the story. The production values throughout the story were generally quite good, with the Cybermen having an extremely good redesign. The spacesuits as well are pretty well done, despite being again a little silly, and quite why and how the Doctor has the same ones as the Moonbase itself is a little mystifying. Not to mention that the existing shot of the Cybermen conferring in the spaceship in episode 4 is beautiful, with an absolutely excellent set. The characters are really good for the most part and do a good job of being scientists for the Moonbase itself, and are generally well acted, despite a select few naff moments of performance in episodes 2 and 4. One other big thing that irked me is a fairly big plot hole within the story. I'm going to issue a spoiler warning here right now, as I'm going to have to explain a bit of the story to talk about this point. There should be a time on screen now to skip ahead to the conclusion if you want to stay spoiler free, but either ways, here we go, spoiler and plot hole time. Right, so in episode 3, Polly comes up with the idea of creating a chemical substance cocktail to melt the Cybermen chest units, as she and Ben figure out that they are made of plastic, which works, and they end up overthrowing the Cybermen to a minor extent in this episode. My problem, however, is that this particular chemical substance that melts plastic is sprayed onto the Cybermen using plastic spray bottles. How did it not melt away the bottles? And before people make the argument of that you can only see the bottles in episode 3 of the story, and the animated reconstruction on the DVD made it up as to what they were using, note that you can actually see the spray bottles they were using at the start of episode 4. Overall, I'm not sure what to say more on the Moonbase. It overall is a decent entry into season 4, and whereas not a very strong one, I do think there has a fair few problems, e.g. it being a bit silly and that there's a few plot holes here and there. It's a pretty solid story overall, and I'd happily watch this one again if I wanted to. Not an amazing story, but a pretty decent one overall at a 7 out of 10.